Hola a todas y a todos, estamos en Rompeviento Televisión por Internet, en Luchadoras. Yo soy Lulú Barrera y todo el equipo de Luchadoras y de Rompeviento el día de hoy tenemos una sorpresa gigante, una entrevista iluminadora con Vandana Shiva, activista ecofeminista. Vandana es una pensadora que pone en jaque con un pensamiento revolucionario al sistema depredador de vida en el que vivimos, anunciando nuevas potencialidades de vida, nuevas formas de mundos posibles, reconociendo que la tierra es la fuerza vital que nos sostiene y que además debemos de preservar. El día de hoy estamos con ella. Bienvenida, Vandana. Welcome.
Hello.
We're so honored of having you in the set. So
I'm happy to be here.
We want to have a challenging and inspiring discussion with you. So probably to begin with, I would like to explore a little bit more around the concept of the earth as a living entity and what does that shines to our thinking in the context of devastating capitalism we live in today.
If the earth wasn't alive, we wouldn't be alive because it's the oxygen that the trees give us to breathe that becomes our breath of life. It's the soil and the seed and the sun and the water that helps us make the food that nourishes our bodies. And without the water the earth gives, an amazing hydrological cycle, we'd have no water. So this illusion that we are separate from the earth was a very important illusion created by the convergence of two forms of power. The power of the new capital, which itself was an illusion because capital is derived from the Latin word caput, which just means heads of cattle. So there used to be real wealth, but then capital wanted to make it look like money created wealth rather than the land creates wealth, people's work create wealth. And capitalism then merged with old notions of domination over women, over the earth, and it became what I call capitalist patriarchy. So the structure was created to say we are separate from the earth. Very artificial structure. And I'm so glad that the current Pope, in his Laudato Si', has pointed out how wrong that idea of separation was, that we are not masters and owners and conquerors. Now, the separation was constructed out of a very false, mechanistic philosophy of the natural sciences, which laid the foundations of all that was to come later. And the so-called architects of this were Francis Bacon, called the father of modern science, Newton, Descartes. What did Bacon? Only men, but Bacon wrote a book called The Birth of Masculine Time, in which he said, now onwards time and history will be masculine, because the effeminate of the earth and the effeminate of women and the effeminate and ordinary people will be subjugated by superheroes acting on the basis of mastery of knowledge. And then he went on to say, raping nature gives us more knowledge than relating peacefully to her. Bacon is the reason the Royal Society of Science exists in England. And they said our main objective is to have mastery over the world. Already the wrong direction of how you think of knowledge and science. And then you had a Locke saying it's when human beings mix their work with nature that they create property, in which case every peasant has the first right to seed and the first right to land. But then they went on to say no, but it's the spiritual labor of the owner of capital who owns the peasant and who owns the mule and who owns the women, that they are property. And out of that property in people and the earth, capital creates property, and that was the beginning of private property, including the enclosures of the commons in England. And the word private is derived from privare, which means to deprive, because you took what was common and then deprived it. And then you got a Hobbes saying people can't cooperate, people can't work together. Therefore, you need a strong arm, the strong arm of the state, in order to allow all this to grow. The idea of nature as dead and just inert material to be exploited went hand in hand with declaring women as a passive sex, as empty bodies. And I had to do a convocation for 100 years of a women's college in the United States. And I usually like to get educated. So I went to the archives. There used to be debates 100 years ago in America that if girls go to college, their brains will expand, their uterus will shrink, and therefore they will not be good reproductive machine, and that's their first task.
Yeah, exactly.
That their brain should stay shrunk. That's why when we talk ecofeminism and we talk the rising of the earth and women, it's basically reclaiming our power, our creativity, our capacity to produce. We run the economy, and yet the dominant economy doesn't count our work. All knowledge is the basis of our knowledge, and yet we don't know. It's those who pirate our knowledge who can invent it and patent it, and then take royalties from us. And what was started then, 200 years ago, a total deviation through these illusions, is being refined with further illusions that are bringing humanity and the planet to an absolute brink. Every scientist talks about us being at the tipping point, and it's that insanity that brought us to this tipping point.
And precisely, I wanted to ask you about this breaking point. Are we not being able to see it, or our disconnectedness of understanding life, nature, and earth is not allowing us to see it? Or let's not be naive. Are we intentionally not seeing it in order to the powers to continue as they are?
Well, you know, for the peasants in my region in the Himalaya, I come from the area in the Himalaya, where my first activism began 45 years ago with this amazing movement called Chipko, where women came out and said, we are going to hug the trees. You'll have to kill us before you kill the trees, because they recognized the connection between the forests and the rivers and the soil. And as the landslides were starting, they said, if you keep cutting the forests, we are going to be wiped out. This year, we have had 2 years after a very terrible, tragic accident, because even though the forests stopped being cut because of the Chipko movement, they're building more and more roads, they're making more and more hotels, because everyone making big money in boring cities, in horrible offices, then wants to run away to nature. And so they want fancy hotels, big roads, and the consequence has been more and more deforestation. 2 years ago, we had such heavy climate-related rains, climate extreme-related rains, that we had a flooding that washed away 20,000 people. Now, every peasant I talked to after that, they said this is about instability of the climate, and it is about human action. That's what the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is saying in heavier language. This is anthropogenic climate change. The woman in the village knows this is anthropogenic climate change. She just says this is result of sinful action by a few greedy people who are destroying the planet. They understand. Who are the people who are being blind? Those who've developed comfort in this 200 year of a world of money replacing life. And the people who then want to keep others blind are those who are making money out of the fossil fuel empire, countries that are able to rule the world because through oil they rule the world. Industrial farming itself is fossil farming. It's fertilizers, it's pesticides, it's machines, all based on fossil fuel. It's 50% of the climate problem, as I've written in my book, Soil Not Oil. They know themselves that this is causing it. But then they spin entire research on climate skeptics. They attack true scientists, as much as they do in the field of agriculture, seeds, and transgenics. The actual scientists are attacked. Those who are perpetuating the fraud of GMOs feeding the world are the ones who get the money to do the attacks. And there's an even more perverse issue. And this has to do with two phenomena that are now so dominant. One of them is the kind of hate that is pervading everywhere. whether it be in the US elections or it can be tragic accidents and tragic phenomena you've had, or in India, religious hate.
Yeah.
But a lot of this hate is building on the discontents of globalization.
Absolutely.
And people are angry, people are frustrated. All of those white unemployed workers of America had good jobs. But automobile industry is gone, steel is gone, globalization said we'll make cheap stuff. And Walmart will import from China. Apple will have a patent, but all the manufacturing will be done in China. So when everyone is unemployed in America because of outsourcing designed by American industry, upheld by the US government.
And to sustain a comfort type of lifestyle.
Exactly. So what happens? They're available for hate. And that's why someone who, like Trump, who is not presidential in any way, can actually be the main candidate for one party. But there are other places where we are made to think the hate is intrinsic to religion. And I'll give you two examples.
Can I hold a second?
Sure.
Just to go quickly on a quick pause and come back.
Sure.
Vamos a hacer una pausa y volvemos justo para profundizar sobre la violencia profunda que el sistema capitalista está caracterizando todas las relaciones sociales en el mundo actual. Estamos con Vandana Shiva en Luchadoras, ya volvemos. Estamos de regreso en Luchadoras y justo nos quedamos a punto de que la doctora Vandana Shiva nos diera una ejemplificación a través de dos casos acerca de temas como violencia, resultado de pues las relaciones de capital que están prevaleciendo.
So there's a big diversion by those who have benefited from raping the earth and extracting wealth from societies through so-called free trade now, but the basic structures of capital accumulation. And that diversion is by saying, oh, this is about religion. I'll give you just two stories. We hear a lot about Boko Haram, a mysterious group that came up in Nigeria. Well, they're around Lake Chad, which is 22,000 square kilometers, biggest lake. Used to support 9 million people. Sustainable fisheries, sustainable farming, sustainable pastoralism. And then they started to divert the river of the lake for commodified industrial farming. 80% water was diverted out in order to irrigate fields, commercial fields. Lake has dried up. Now the people are fighting each other because there's no water. That is what has been given the name Boko Haram. And then there are arms. The same people who do big arms trade also do small arms trade. Syria, which has totally changed the picture of the world with its refugee crisis, where half of the Syrians are outside Syria, began in 2009. Green revolution agriculture of the kind that was started in Mexico and India in the 60s was also brought to Syria, the Fertile Crescent where agriculture started. They pushed seeds that require more water and more chemicals. That meant the water was mined. Then you had climate change and an extended drought. 2009, 1 million peasants moved as refugees into the cities, destabilized the structure. Of course, then the United States was there to finance some of the refugees, to say, now you be rebels against Assad, rather than we will change our agriculture policy and not push chemicals and these seeds. In fact, during the Iraq war, they even passed an Iraqi Order 81, which said in Iraq, which is a source of amazing diversity, they could not use local seeds. They had to use Monsanto seeds. So now you see what Syria is about. But this is about the violence against the earth and violence against societies because of a particular way of building the economy, including the agriculture economy, that best benefits the fossil industry, the fertilizer industry, the seed monopoly industry, and then the global powers, because Kissinger said very clearly, food is a weapon. We mustn't ever forget that. And now I say, and they've added to it, seed as a weapon. Final issue is that those who have caused the problem are turning this crisis into their next opportunity.
Yeah, for industry.
For industry. So you have climate smart agriculture. The same Monsanto that destroyed our seeds is now stealing our seeds. And Gates is helping them to pirate our climate resilient seeds that our peasants have evolved, particularly women, because till the corporations entered the seed sector, the primary breeders were women. I'm sure it's the case in Mexico, it was definitely the case in India, where it was the woman who really knew what seed selection, breeding and saving was about. Well, they're now into climate smart agriculture. And Monsanto has bought up the world's biggest climate data corporation, the world's biggest soil data corporation, and they're all together betting on what they call big data, turning data into a new commodity. They're putting spyware into tractors. And they have a collaboration with John Deere, the tractor company. So they put spyware into the tractor, and the tractor sends information, the soil is this in nutrition, the soil has this much moisture. It goes to Monsanto, and Monsanto sells that data back to you and says, money. So everything in their worldview is a commodity. In our life, everything is sovereign, autonomous, self-organized living. We talk freedom, we talk intelligence, we talk creativity. They talk ownership, they talk domination, they talk so-called free trade, like the TPP, which is about taking freedom away from everyone.
Yeah, and I have like thousands of thoughts running in my mind now, but I would like to go back to the first idea of the Earth as a living entity, and the lack of awareness of us regarding all the interrelations of the systems and the functions. Because the two examples you gave were exactly an example of the lack we have to see the interdependence of the systems. So, but you also push us to question some of the concepts that have reigned our thought and our thinking. And you were talking about wealth, and I was thinking, shouldn't we revise the concept of wealth, or what is the concept of wealth you're speaking about? Because wealth is also associated for many of us to capital powers, and not anymore as something associated to nature.
Okay, so let's begin with the issue of wealth. The original meaning of wealth is well-being. It never meant money. It meant the state of well-being. If I improve my wealth, I'm improving my well-being. Thank goodness there are actual countries now questioning the idea of GNP and GDP, which is just money and commodification, as a measure of the real economy. So I work with the government of Bhutan. They invited me to help them make a transition to 100% organic Bhutan. And our team goes there every year, the Bhutanese farmers come to us at Navdanya, where we offer training and courses, and people can see what is being offered at the Earth University on the website of navdanya.org. Bhutan decided to not measure GDP.
Wow.
It said we are going to measure not gross national product, we're going to measure gross national happiness and well-being.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And they decided that well-being is based on healthy nature, so they're going to keep 75% of their forests as forests. It's based on knowing who you are, which is why your traditions become very important, because that's where your identity comes from. It means respect for culture, but also elders who carry that culture. And because it's a Buddhist society based on compassion, they definitely talk about those principles of compassion being central to well-being. So there is a redefining and reclaiming taking place anywhere. The idea of the living earth, people like the person who did the NASA studies and said the earth regulates herself, she's a self-organized organism. He's the one, James Lovelock is his name, he gave the name Gaia and called it the Gaia theory, that the earth organizes herself, she's alive. And Gaia is the name of the earth goddess in Greek. But when the climate negotiations were literally hijacked by United States, sadly, President Obama had just received his Nobel Prize and said Gandhi would declare war today, which was so wrong. He should not speak on behalf of Gandhi. If he wants to declare war, let it be your responsibility. Don't claim Gandhi to be part of your warmongering. He came to Copenhagen and totally destroyed the negotiations for a climate treaty. That's when President Evo Morales said, we were here to defend the rights of Mother Earth, not the rights of polluters. And while we are still negotiating, you are holding a press conference, President Obama, telling us that you've already come to an agreement with the 5 other polluters. We're very sorry. We will continue our work. And so he went back and then called a group of us and did a big meeting, big summit on climate change and the rights of Mother Earth. Out of it came this universal declaration of the rights of Mother Earth, and we now have a very big alliance for the defense of rights of Mother Earth. So we have both processes working. On the one side, we have the processes that are trying to even further violate the earth. And in my view, this idea of genetic engineering, which is taking the idea of living systems as self-organized systems and making them look like machines that are put together by Monsanto, or Bill Gates' new thinking with the defense system and Pentagon of the United States to have gene drives to push species to extinction because they created superweeds as a result of the herbicide tolerance, that all of this thinking is the final war. It's the final war against humanity, final war against the earth. No one can win this one. No one. During the colonial wars, the Europeans won a little bit. We paid the price. During this one, no one will win. No one. Because life will be extinguished. That is why we have to think in fresh ways. And those fresh ways are the ways that women have thought, that nature has thought, that peasants have thought, that working class people have known, that ancient cultures have known, that and indigenous people. That is where we have to turn. To both know that the earth is alive, 2, that we have a duty to the earth and she has rights, 3, we have through that duty a duty to resist this final attack. And the TPP is part of that final attack.
We have in the team of Luchadoras set of questions that you are like going through all of them very naturally, like the flow of a river. So I'm going to make a stop here, and in the next segment we're going to talk a little bit more about women's role in and knowledge that had been historically held by women in this in the picture. Vamos a hacer una pausa. Estamos en Luchadoras platicando con la doctora Vandana Shiva. Ya volvemos.
Otra.
Estamos de regreso en Luchadoras, el día de hoy en un programa especial gracias a Rompeviento, en un programa especial de 1 hora, así que sigan la siguiente media hora con nosotras enganchadas con la doctora Vandana Shiva. So we were speaking about the type of knowledge that current economies, global economies and powerful economies give value to, and by therefore giving value to one type of knowledge, they marginalize other types of knowledge that are ancestral, and having held by indigenous peoples, indigenous cultures, but also women. So we would like to explore a bit more about your views on women's contribution and care work on this new, how to say it, new proposal of finding the way through.
Well, because we are at this precipice where humanity being pushed to extinction as a species on this planet because the conditions of our life are destroyed on the planet. A cockroach might survive, some other species might survive, but not the temperatures, not the soil fertility, not the water that we need, because exactly the system that was shown in that amazing animation, this system is about extraction. And it extracts from the earth and it extracts from people. The extraction of water from people's commons is the basis of that water privatization economy. And after a point there's no water because that economy does not know how to give back. Whereas a woman knows how to nourish a spring. And that's why the Chipko movement protected the forest so our springs could run so that we would have water and women wouldn't have to walk 10 miles every day. Every movement I have been part of as a warrior is women saying no more after the 10-mile walk. I was with the women of Plachimada, a little village in Kerala. In Kerala, where Coca-Cola was mining 1.5 liters a day, left a famine, women walking 10 miles, then Malama said no more. And they shut Coca-Cola down. Just like in Cochabamba, they shut Bechtel down. Now, women's knowledge is about nourishing life, and that is deep knowledge of relationships. The mechanistic knowledge that is the dominant knowledge for extraction, exploitation, is a knowledge of fragmentation and division, where everything is treated as separate. And the separatism in the mind is rewarded as science, whereas the knowledge of relationship is defined as non-science, even anti-science. That is the structure we have to correct. And when I read this And, you know, all the time now the attacks are in the name of science and anti-science. And they're spending so much time trying to deny that I ever studied physics and did an MSc in particle physics and a PhD in the foundations of quantum theory. They're so desperate to prove that I haven't studied. And they're so desperate to say I'm an activist. Of course I'm an activist. Thank goodness I'm an activist. Everyone should be an activist. Now, in the seed is women's knowledge. All indigenous seed is a distillation of millennia and millennia and millennia of the knowledge of our grandmothers. And that knowledge knows the relationship between soil and seed, between different seeds, that's why you get milpa, between the corn and the bean that climbs, and the squash and the pumpkin, and that is a complete meal. They know that relationship. Find me one industrial scientist who can grow more than one monoculture crop. They don't know how to study relationship. So I don't call it a different kind of science. I call it the domination of ignorance of how the world works, how life works. So the ignorant are ruling. And of course they have swear words. So when, you know, the Spanish came and started killing indigenous people in this land, or the British came to India, what were the two words that were central to their vocabulary? The first word was terra nullius, the earth is empty. If there are no white Christians living here, it's for us to grab, because we are not fully human. The second word was barbarians. If you look at the papal bull, you look at all the literature of that time, we were the barbarians, they were the civilizing mission. Today's civilizing mission is now couched in the language of the dominant, exploitative, reductionist science, mechanistic science, which is actually ignorance of relationships. Yeah. And every time they want to fight, they say, you're a barbarian, you don't know science. No. Just like we were not barbarians then, we had our civilizations. We are not barbarians today, we have our sciences. So science has become the substitute of the civilizing mission. Science as a word, not science as a way of knowing, not science as an interaction with the world, not science as a guide of how to live. The science of domination, science with a capital S, is a handmaiden of global capitalist patriarchy. And as global capitalist patriarchy's handmaiden, it is intrinsically related to violence against the earth, women, indigenous people, farmers. So it's not an accident that this kind of science has wiped out 300,000 Indian farmers who've been pushed to suicide, has uprooted the peasantry of Mexico, one of the most proud peasantries, and now most of them have had to leave the land, and corn today is getting imported from America because of NAFTA. So if you put it all together, the economics of it, the science of it, the governance of it, the free trade bit, then you realize these are just insane men gone mad with their power, gone mad with greed, gone mad with their illusions, gone mad with their being above any accountability and any democracy. And we owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to them to bring sanity to them. And it's the women of the world who help make these insane people sane.
And I'm thinking about compassion when you say this last bit.
Yes, compassion. So, you know, people say, do you hate Monsanto? And I always say, but how can I hate a fiction? You know, Monsanto is an entity created by a group of people to sell glyphosate, sell Roundup, sell transgenic corn. There are men behind it. Some actual men are the managers and the CEO. Then there are real men, the billionaires, who are the owners of the investment funds that own Monsanto. I said, if we knew who they are, because they hide, the owners of the Vanguard Fund, which is the biggest shareholder of Monsanto, hides. We don't know who those are.
Yeah,
they hide. It's not public. If they come out in the open, I'll give them a big hug.
Great. So let's make another quick stop. Y vamos a ver todos los cortes que hemos estado viendo son producto del arte, tanto de iniciativas bolivianas, de artistas que están pues involucrados en temas de ecología y defensa de la tierra, tanto de un colectivo que se llama Negro Semilla aquí en México y que hace unas creaciones preciosas. Vamos a hacer este corte y regresamos. Estamos de regreso en Luchadoras teniendo una conversación inspiradora, retadora con Vandana Shiva. One of the strongest metaphors or analogies you do with the devastation to the earth is the one of rape towards women. I would like you to speak a little bit more about that, but there's also something else. Some types of feminism, more liberal and Eurocentric, if you want to call it that way, have also denied of the imposition of or the obligation to give birth as imposed to women. Mm-hmm. And while speaking to you and speaking to other thinkers like Silvia Rivera Cusicanqui from Bolivia, we're seeing how recovering that the potential of giving birth or nurturing life, it's another way to twist the equation and regain a sense towards that.
But you know, in all cultures, till the rise of industrial capitalism, birth was the centerpiece of all sacredness. Go to any ancient temple. Fertility, women, and birth was where the sacred was. We have an amazing fair of creation. 30 million people come to bathe in the Ganges. It's called the Kumbh Mela. The Kumbh is the pot. The pot, what is it a symbol of?
Yeah.
The womb. Mm-hmm. And why do 30 million people come to celebrate creation and the symbol of the womb? Because that is where creation constantly renews herself. I think Western feminists have often adopted capitalist patriarchy's categories. I've written about it in my book Earth Democracy, which is lying here. I talk about the unintended convergence. That by adopting those categories of capitalist patriarchy, that nature is dead. Or that birth is a prison. That the body is a prison. That was Descartes' idea, right? He said, the body is a prison, we must escape from it, and only a few supermen can escape and get this objective knowledge. So birth and creation was treated as a chain, imprisonment, of being part of nature. And there was writings that said, in birthing, humanity becomes part of nature. And therefore, in the attack on fertility is the conquest of nature and women's bodies. But sadly, a lot of the funding by capitalist patriarchy shaped a lot of those who would actually perpetuate that. I'll give you 2 examples. So I've written in this book about how, because of commercial farming, because of the fact that women who did all the work were now redundant with chemicals, machines, tractors, a new phenomena started in India, which we had not seen before, of female feticide.
Yeah.
And according to Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate, 30 million Indian girls have not been allowed to be born. In India, in our laws, we call it female feticide. Mm-hmm. First, the Americans say, don't use feticide. But you're killing a fetus in the womb, that's feticide. Then they say, no, it's the right to abortion. Here you are, you're allowing 30 million girls to not be allowed to be born because of the way the structure of capitalist patriarchy has seeped all the way into our societies. And the higher the richness, the higher the growth, the higher the wiping out of girls. It's not in the poorer parts of India. It's in rich Punjab. In Delhi, it's in the richest part of Delhi. So they are talking about aborting a female child as a liberation of women. How can you celebrate the killing of future women as a liberation of women? So they've got these categories wrong. But I think the fragmentation and separation is so deep, for example, in the US, where given that when patriarchy wanted to take control of birth, and even in Europe, that's when the witch hunt started. The witch hunts were really getting women's expertise out of healthcare,
when
out
the
of
science
birthing.
Was
right.
emerging.
And then the men took over as experts. And then they interestingly divided. Here's a woman's body. I had a beautiful son. My most exciting moment was when I gave birth to this son of mine. And around that time, I was writing my book, Biopiracy, and Staying Alive, all of these chapters were coming together. And here were the images of a fetus outside a woman's body. And then you've got one gang of people in America defending the fetus in the name of right to life, and the others defending the right to choice, when all they've done is dismembered an integral entity, which is a mother with a baby, and both are one, till the child comes out. And even then the mother cares. So the caring economy, virtues of care, birth has been treated as a colonization so that we can be colonized by destroying our fertility. So we get the Terminator technology to make sterile seed. So we get the exterminator technology to wipe out life. If birth has to be reclaimed, through it we reclaim our capacity to create. And that is our strongest power, because all of the destructive edifice of 200 years of capitalist patriarchy is based on substituting creation and creativity with destruction defined as creating wealth, creating intellectual property. So when Monsanto destroys a seed by adding toxic seeds to it, it is suddenly its creation of a seed. When a grandmother selects the best seed to feed her children, it is not knowledge. These are the walls that we really have to break. So, you know, in my language, seed is bija. Ja is life. Bija is that from which life arises again and again and again, without any external support. That is the power of life. That's the power of birth. That's the power of reproduction, which is in the seed, which is in every person. Now, as ecofeminists, we are not saying every mother should be a reproductive machine. We are not saying that. We are saying, but the potential of the creativity of birth and the worldview around it, the patriarchs cannot take that away from us. So very often what's done is they say, oh, you're forcing everyone to be a mother. No, but don't take away my freedom to be a mother. Don't take away my experience and knowledge. If there were no mothers, there would be no humans. Just as if there was no nature, we wouldn't have human life. So mothers are vital to the continuity of the human species. Does not mean every human being must be a mother. Seeds are vital to the continuity of biodiversity on this planet. And seeds, interestingly, have emerged as the heart of economic contest, knowledge contest. You know, I got involved in saving seeds because of the whole issue of World Trade Organization, intellectual property rights, GMOs, transgenics, Monsanto. I said, I'm going to save seeds. And my work in Navdanya over the last 30 years, it is our 30th anniversary beginning now, has been to celebrate the seed, and the seed has so much to teach us. So we saved seed. We are now finding we can grow 2 times the food India needs if only we save our seeds. Because the Monsanto seeds are seeds of hunger. They're seeds of suicides, as the 300,000 suicides show.
Seeds of death.
They are seeds of death. They literally are seeds of death, and this logic of terminating, which is what they still like to do if we didn't have international systems like the CBD to block it. People, you know, this fragmentation, just like they separated the fetus from the mother and made it look like the fetus could exist outside a mother and you could defend its rights up in the air, they've separated food from seed. And most people forgot that food comes from seed. You wouldn't have corn to eat if there wasn't corn seed. You wouldn't have rice to eat if there wasn't rice seed. So this truncation, and then they've turned both into commodities. They turned food into a commodity by separating it from seed, and they turned seed into intellectual property and commodity. So reclaiming our food systems and reclaiming the seed is vital, because 75% of all ecological destruction is because of industrial farming and industrial seed. 75% of all diseases, chronic diseases, are rooted in bad food. In India, we've done a calculation. This is about $2 trillion annually of cost society is bearing, because capitalist patriarchy's other uniqueness is it externalizes costs. It takes the profits. That's why the corporation formed in 1600, East India Company, was called a limited liability corporation. We have no liabilities. We make the money, it's ours. If there's a problem, it's society's. And that's how Mexico continues to bear the burden of NAFTA and WTO. India bears the burden of WTO. And it's time to say no more free trade agreements that colonize the seed and take away our seed freedom.
And I was thinking exactly about these kind of perverse concepts, and thinking about the concept, I think you have also written about this, of high tech. And I was thinking precisely as the seed, as there's not technology as advanced as the seed that can continue life and once and again.
You know, I think what we've really seen happen in the last 100 years more, 200 years of starting to go crazy, but 100 years of hyper insanity, is what were tools that humanity has always had. This cup is a tool for holding water. This table is a tool for holding the cup. These are tools, they're means. It's the minute we turn these tools into ends, then the language of high-tech starts. And the language of technology as an end in itself. And therefore, the only argument Monsanto has for pushing GMOs in Mexico is they're high-tech. No, we're going to see if like a cup can hold water, I won't take a leaky cup. Your GMOs are leaky seeds. They leak contamination. And look at all the studies done by my dear friend Ignacio Chapela on the contamination of Mexican corn. It's a leaky corn. They're giving human beings leaky guts, with children of America having. No, we don't want leaky cups. That's actually bad technology. It's crude technology. It's failed technology. It's not high tech. Money was similarly just a means we've always had. I mean, look at museums. You have coins from I don't know how long ago. Did we go and worship that coin? No. They want us to worship Wall Street.
So also you've been in Mexico several times, and you've been in contact with initiatives here locally. Can you tell us about which fights and resistance are you seeing in our country?
Corn, of course, is absolutely central to Mexico reclaiming its identity as corn. So I was at a public hearing on stopping transgenic corn in Oaxaca, and the girls came so beautifully and had a ceremony saying, "We are corn." And they sang songs about "We are corn." I have worked with all the movements, including the farmers' movements. And with Ernesto, who's now with the Senate, I have worked for 20 years to deal with all of this mischievous imposition. What I have witnessed in terms of Mexico being right next to the border of the US and yet holding back the corn empire is, to me, very, very impressive. My first visit was in 1985 to visit Ivan Illich and to go to Oaxaca. And I've just felt so close to Mexico because the Mexico pre-globalization was so like India. You know, when I went to Indian villages, when you come to, you know, your animals look same, and even your tortilla and a chapati are the same. So I have a deep bond with Mexico. I think the creativity of the Mexican people. I have also, on one of my visits, visited the birthplace of Zapata. We have our Gandhi, you have your Zapata. And I think it's time for both of our cultures and civilizations to say, we will not forget. They live in each of us. Our warriors, you know, we might be warriors of different kinds, but we all have to be warriors for the earth, for our freedoms, for our cultures, for our humanity.
You were speaking about rituals and corn in the rituals, and that makes me think also about the spirituality in this fight, in the struggle, in the resistance, and the place of spirituality within earth. Can you speak about?
Well, you know, spirituality basically is two things: understanding the relationships, and therefore not violating, understanding that there's life. There's life in the tiniest microbe. There's a life in the big universe of which we are a part. That is spirituality. Understanding the interconnectedness of human beings as part of the universe, part of nature. And spirituality is what they're really afraid of, because the crass consumerism they need to cultivate in society in order to have their empire, you know, their empire of the Coca-Colas and the McDonald's can only work if they make us forget that seed is sacred, food is sacred, water is sacred. Reclaiming spirituality is part of the war, of being warriors. A sacred spiritual warrior is what women today have to become. And I want to remind you that amaranth, which is a beautiful sacred crop for Mexico and for us, in your colonization, amaranth was banned. It was illegal to grow and use amaranth because it was so sacred. Today they're trying to wipe out the amaranth through these exterminator technologies called gene drives brought by US Defense and Bill Gates. I think the sacredness of our seeds, the sacredness of our food, the sacredness of our water, the sacredness of our bodies, the sacredness of our communities, the sacredness of this entire planet, that is the energy that we have. We don't have to be given it. So when people say we have to empower women, I said, no, you just have to take the disempowerment away.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Muchas gracias también a ustedes. Estuvimos platicando hoy con Vandana Shiva, una guerrera espiritual que nos abre caminos múltiples para recuperar vías posibles para la lucha como mujeres, como comunidades, en medio de una guerra que le ha quitado la sacralidad, como ella nos dice, a la existencia, a la tierra, a la vida humana. Es momento, creo, es lo que me despierta, después se lo traduciré, I'll translate you this later, de recuperar las conexiones. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much for such an inspiring conversation. Quédense en Rompeviento. Este fue Luchadoras.
Smith and Pocahontas and had a really mad affair, and when her dad wants to kill him, no, she said, oh please daddy, oh don't you dare, it gives me fever kisses me, fever when he holds me tight.